to Cloud. I got it.
Okay.
Okay, we are now live. Let's see, does everybody see my PowerPoint? How do you do? Okay. Research class 1, secondary sources, and a discussion on the types of legal authority. To know the difference between the different types of legal authority is important, so you know you're citing to something that's persuasive and valuable and all of that good stuff. For today, I'm going to walk you through some of the major secondary sources in a quiz format, so hopefully you guys will speak up and talk along a bit. We'll go through some of that, and then I'm going to give you my 2 important research tips towards the end, and then if I have time, I'm going to give you an extremely quick demo, probably just on Westlaw, because you'll have the opportunity to hear the Lexis vendor do Lexis training on his products, and he can work Lexis backwards and forwards around me. So I'll let him do his skills on that. So without further ado, pop quiz, secondary sources in the context of some realistic type legal questions. So here's question 1. Your boss informs you that she needs you to quickly identify an applicable statute and a couple of cases for a document that she needs to file. So if you know you were looking for a statute and some cases that interpret that statute, how would you think to begin your research just in general? And then I've given you 4 options, and then E, anything else that I haven't included there. You can read through the list and see what you think. If you're going to do statutory research, find a law on point that would govern your situation, perhaps. Yes, Ghoul, you raised your hand.
Did you want us to answer the question?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay. All right, so I'm thinking A.
Online database, do general research to see what's available and filter. Okay. That's a good option. Let's see. 4 participants have raised their hands. Who else here? Dominic, do you have another thought?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe C.
Firm's library, and go to the annotated statute. So when it says annotated statutes, what does it mean by annotation? Any idea?
Not right now, no.
Not right now. So statutes is the written down, those are your laws. So by title and section. So it's the actual laws. So at the end of each section in an annotated statute, you'll get notes that point you to case opinions that analyze and interpret that statutory section. So if you found your statute in an annotated statute, you can also gain access to cases that interpret that statute, to law review articles and other sources that have discussed that statute. So that's a good way of finding additional information on a statute as well, using the annotated statute, either in print in your firm or online in Lexis and Westlaw. They would both have versions of annotated statutes from the federal government as well as all 50 states as well. Okay, good. Any other thoughts on that? What else might help? Let me see here. Why isn't my slide? So actually all of those potential answers could potentially be helpful. Database and filter, find a case on point. If you find a case on point, it'll probably give the citation to the statute. And then you can use that citation and find the statute, annotated code. And Google is always important too. I always, well, maybe not always, but I'm a bad librarian and I start with Google to see what shows up. But since I'm a librarian, I can sort of analyze my results and know what hits are worthwhile and what aren't. What's from a government website and what's generated by a fifth grader for his history project. So Google is an Uber index, but you have to be very careful about which answers you are going to. So here's a screenshot of an annotated statute in print. So if we had no COVID and we were in the library, this is a page out of Purdon's Pennsylvania Statutes Annotated. This is Title 23, Section 5321 of the Pennsylvania statutes dealing with child custody. And at the end of the section, you'll see these things called notes of decision right here, notes of decision. So your notes of decision are brief paragraph descriptions of the holding of the case along with their citation. So you found your statute dealing with child custody, and then you've got cases that are interpreting the statute right from within the annotated code. Does that sort of make sense? So you're using your statute to find cases that interpret it. So that's possibility number one. Possibility two, use a secondary source. So maybe your law firm practices child family law, and they have the West Pennsylvania practice on their shelves. So West Pennsylvania practice, the family law practice volume. Maybe you went to the index, or you just did a search in Westlaw. Since this is a West publication, this would appear on probably your Westlaw subscription if you are working in a firm in Pennsylvania. You would click, you'd log into Westlaw, you would click on secondary sources, you would type West Pennsylvania practice family, and you would pull this set. And you would do your search. If you're doing child custody for grandparents, you type child custody grandparents, and you'd probably arrive at some of these sections. You would read these sections. 28.2 here is child custody in general to get an overview of the topic. And then the footnotes lead you to primary sources. Here's a few opinions with their citations, so you could pull them up on Lexis or Westlaw. And then also this couple of footnotes here to the Pennsylvania Consolidated Statute, section 5322. So an overview of the topic in the text, and then the footnotes lead you to cases, statutes, maybe law review articles, and other things that are discussing Pennsylvania child custody. So annotated code leads you to stuff. A secondary source on point leads you to stuff. So you sort of get the idea. There's no right way. I mean, there's no one way to conduct legal research. It's sort of like all roads lead to Rome, right? You can start in one place and get there. You can start another place and maybe get there as well. There's no right path. Legal research isn't necessarily linear. Question 2. You're researching a Pennsylvania family law issue that you're unfamiliar with. Of the following listed secondary sources, which one would you think would be most helpful in starting your research. So Pennsylvania family law issue. Carrie,
I would go with the Pennsylvania Law Encyclopedia.
okay, okay. That's a good, very initial start because it's an encyclopedia. So it would be child custody, 2 sentences, and maybe the statute, and that's all you would get. But yeah, definitely worth your time. Let's see, who else? Lindsay.
I would use number 7, the Pennsylvania treaties, such as this, yeah, the family law practice and procedure with forms, because it would tell you where to go from there.
Yeah, that's, if you have access to that, either online or in a library physically, that's probably your best bet. Pennsylvania family law practice, a legal practitioner type lawyer's guide. Yeah, general treatise on family law is fine, but you'd probably want to find something that's specific to your jurisdiction, Pennsylvania. Let's see. So in this case, I'm in law school and I'm using our library catalog here. So from the library homepage, there's the search box there, and I type in Pennsylvania family law. And one of my first hits is to Pennsylvania Family Law Practice and Procedure. It's the West Pennsylvania Practice Series right here. It would give me the call number and where to find it in the library. And then likely right next to it in another entry, you would also see this title listed, and it would say Westlaw, so that you would know that West Pennsylvania Practice Family Law is also available on Westlaw electronically. So even though we've got COVID going on and we can't go to the library to walk the stacks and chit chat with one another, we can still find the vast bulk of things electronically. So if titles that you come across are published by Westlaw or Thomson Reuters, chances are they're going to be available on the Westlaw platform. And then likewise, if something's published by LexisNexis, it'll probably appear electronically in your Lexis account. So keep those in the back of your mind. Lexis and Westlaw are both great, but the secondary sources that they each contain will be different based upon who publishes what. Does that make sense? So question 3 here. If you were writing a paper or your managing attorney was writing a paper on how many states across the country allow for grandparent visitation in regard to child custody issues, what would likely be the best source if you're looking for an across the country scope of grandparent visitation and whether each state in the country has such a statute? What would you think? Tom?
Would it be a law review article?
Law review article? Possibly, yes. Good choice. Any other thoughts? Nicholas?
A legal encyclopedia might have a scope of all the states.
Maybe, but I doubt it. I don't think it would cover the entire country.
Got it.
Does anyone want to go for number 2? ALR. That's my favorite source. The American Law Reports. So ALR's American Law Reports. It's available electronically in both Lexis or Westlaw. So if I logged into Westlaw, I clicked on secondary sources and I clicked on ALR. And I ran a search in that specific narrow database in Westlaw. And I did grandparent visitation, child custody, something like that. One of my first hits would be this article here in ALR Fifth, grandparents visitation rights when the child's parents are living. So it'll give you a summary of the national trends on grandparent visitation. And then in the table of court cases and statutes, it'll list all 50 states, and it will give you the statutory, or it'll give you the statutory citation for the statutes in all of the states. So here are my Pennsylvania sites, Pennsylvania statutes annotated, section 5312 and others. In Rhode Island, here's my Rhode Island statutes, and likewise. So if I'm looking for a survey across the country, an ALR article might be my best bet, because it deals with a very, very specific issue, grandparent visitation when children are living, and then it covers it in depth in all of the jurisdictions. So potentially a very valuable research if you're writing a law review article. And then of course, somebody suggested a law review article as well. There's probably some hoity-toity law professor from Harvard or Yale or something who's written an article about child custody, and he's surveyed all the country as well. So you might be able to glean all of the statutes through the footnotes. Moving on. Your supervising attorney remembers reading a recent law review article this summer about the America Invents Act of 2011. And apparently this law review article argues that this new act really doesn't do much to reduce the prevalence of dubious or irrational patents. But of course, she can't remember the title of the article, what law review it was in, what year it was published. It was like, well, I remember it was a red book. So you're looking for a law review article. Yeah, Shakshi, you have a thought?
I honestly was gonna say I would Google it first, but then I think maybe Westlaw likes it.
No, Google's all good.
Okay,
Google's
yeah,
fine.
I'll Google it.
Google's fantastic. The next slide, I'll show you how it's fantastic. Of all of these lists, I mean, Lexis and Westlaw likely would get you there. You'd log into Lexis or Westlaw, you go to secondary sources, and then you'd go to law reviews, and then do a search in law reviews for, dubious patents and see what pulls up. Hein Online, it's a separate database. So if you go to the resources list from the law library, so go to the law library homepage, click on resources. Hein Online is one of the first links that we have. Basically, Hein Online is an index of all the law reviews that are published in America. So that would be a good place to run your search as well. And then also the periodical index, the index to legal periodicals, that would be listed in the library resource list as well. Because not every law review article is going to be on Lexis or Westlaw. They're going to have more current things. So if you're looking for older materials, older scholarly materials, you may need to find it in an index like the Legal Periodicals Index, okay? Or of course, as I'll show you as well, the library catalog. So, catalog. I start my search in the catalog. Here's my search box. Thankfully, my managing attorney, she remembered that it dealt with dubious patents. So me being a rocket scientist here, I type dubious patents into my search box. And like literally the first hit that comes up is a link to this Boston College Law Review article called Dubious Patent Reform, dealing with the 2011, whatever it was, Act on Patents. So the moral of the story is that the law library catalog doesn't just pull up books. It pulls up articles, it pulls up other things that we have access to electronically through our databases. So not only are you going to find books, but you're going to find links to Boston College Dubious Patent Reform. You click on that and it passed you right through to the Hein Online database that I was talking about. So, and here's my Google example, right? Dubious patent reform. One of the first hits is to a PDF image from Legal Commons generated by the Boston College Law School. So it's basically a repository of all of the Boston College scholarly works by their faculty. So the same article that was found in Hein Online through our catalog, I also pulled through a Google search. So nothing wrong with Google if you can decipher your hit list and know what you're looking at. So Google is good if you know what you're looking at. Next question. You need to know if the Commonwealth, if our law library has a print copy of the January 15, 2015 issue of the Harvard Law Review. How would you find out what we have access to on campus? Go, yep.
C, check the Widener Commonwealth Law Library catalog.
Okay, that's a wonderful suggestion. Yep. You type Harvard Law Review and then it would give the holdings. Also this nice little thing here called D, check the full text finder. All right. The full text finder is when you go to library databases from the library homepage, the first link is to the full text finder. And it will tell you, after you run your search, all of the different periodicals, law reviews, newspaper publications, anything scholarly that we have access to in some database that we subscribe to. So here's a screenshot of the full text finder. Actually, let me just do this live here. So library, resources, database list, right? So from the database list, here are all of the databases that we subscribe to. Your first link is to the full text finder. And hopefully it will load. If you haven't yet, the first time off campus, log in with your email credentials here in the first set. So here's my email credentials, click submit. And it'll pass you through. No, it won't. This always happens. That's why I take screenshots. Okay, so like that one better. So here's the full text finder. So I'm looking for Harvard Law Review. Harvard Law Review, full text access. Click on the little plus sign. So all of these links down here are the different databases that have Harvard Law Review. And then off to the right, it gives you the holdings. So Academic Search Premier has it from 87 to present. Here's a link to Hein Online. Hein Online has all of the law review articles, all the law reviews. Hein Online has Harvard Law Review from volume 1, 1887 to present. So if you're looking for old stuff, you're going to be hitting Hein Online. All right. And then it also works for magazines as well. Magazines, newspaper, New York Times. Old New York Times, 1857 to 1922. So here's the databases that might have it. So the ProQuest Historical Retrospective has 1800s New York Times. So that's the full text finder. I love that as a tool to see what all I have access to through the databases that the library subscribes to. Okay, here's my little video here to set the stage for.
According to my information, it should appear in this quadrant here, just south of the Rishi Maze.
I hate to say it, but it looks like the system you're searching for doesn't exist.
Impossible. Perhaps the archives are incomplete.
If an item does not appear in our records, it does not exist.
So Obi-Wan seeking knowledge of a lost Starship system goes to the library, right? Goes to the library and asks the Jedi librarian, how cool is that there's a Jedi librarian? Anyway, I digress. We asked the Jedi librarian, I can't find the star system in the database. And well, she's full of hubris and she's really full of herself. And she says, well, if it doesn't exist in the database, this planet doesn't exist. Which is my segue into question 6. All useful secondary sources are found on Lexis or Westlaw. Yes or no? No? No's right. Right's no, of course not, right? Because there are books that are not on Lexis or Westlaw. There are other subscription databases that have more specific content that wouldn't be on Lexis or Westlaw. There's government information on government websites that are not on Westlaw or Lexis because they don't have the time or the storage to download and store everything. Educational websites, valuable tools, especially if you want to find out how to do something. If I'm looking for help on how to conduct legal research or how to find something, I'll go to Google and I'll do an advanced search. I'll do an advanced search on just searching EDU websites for education. And then also searching for a phrase on LibGuides. LibGuides are like study guides that librarians and other professionals create on a topic. So if I'm searching just .edu websites for LibGuides on a particular topic, I'm going to find a bunch of stuff that's awesome. So that's pro tip number A, not even pro tip 1, that's pro tip A. And then of course, libraries as well. So here's an example of things that are not online. Not everything that's printed by publishers makes its way to Lexis, Westlaw, or the NetSphere. The Pennsylvania example is the Pennsylvania PBI series of legal practitioner books. The Pennsylvania Bar Institute, that's the publishing wing of our Bar Association. they make all of these nifty little yellow colored books on how to practice law and how to conduct this kind of trial or how to do this kind of deposition, blah, blah, blah. But none of it's available on Westlaw or Lexis. You'd have to go to a library that subscribes to this standing order. So that's just one handy example of what's not online. So now some questions about legal authority. American jurisprudence second would be what type of authority? Do we know what American jurisprudence is? Carrie?
It's a secondary persuasive.
Secondary persuasive, absolutely. It's American jurisprudence is one of the two main national legal encyclopedias. So it's a secondary source, right? So it would only be persuasive. If you cite it to AmJur in your document, you're a moron. Now, you're using the AmJur second to get you to a statute or a case that's on point, but you would never cite AmJur second. And yeah, it's only persuasive. You'd likely not cite it in a brief, but you would use it to point the way. State statutes are what? Primary or secondary authority? Or does it depend? Tom?
I think it would be primary authority, right? Or I guess no, it would depend. Yeah, it would depend on if it's federal. Yes. Got me. You got me.
Depending on the jurisdiction, right? A state statute is primary because it is the law that comes down from the governing body. But whether it's primary or whether it's primary binding or primary persuasive would depend upon the jurisdiction. So primary authority, according to Black's Law Dictionary, the authority that issues directly from the lawmaking body. So the opinions of the court, the statutes passed by the legislature, the regulations promulgated by the agencies at both the state and federal level. These are all examples of primary sources that you would cite. And then they can be mandatory or persuasive depending upon the jurisdiction. So, segue into the next question. Is a Maryland Supreme Court opinion mandatory or persuasive authority if you're filing a case in Pennsylvania? Jenna?
I'll go with persuasive.
That's a good answer.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Pennsylvania courts probably have no business, but are not required to follow any other state, or actually, or even the federal statutes, unless it's from the Supreme Court. That's outside of their jurisdiction. But it can be persuasive. So if you're in Pennsylvania and it's a novel question, or it's a question that hasn't been decided in Pennsylvania, if New York or Maryland or something has spoken to it, you might throw that in as persuasive authority to help your arguments. So secondary authority, anything that's not issued directly from the lawmaking body would be secondary, and it would always be persuasive in nature. It would be primary or binding. And of course, we've been answering question 10. Why would we use a secondary source in our legal research, especially at the beginning? All of these different reasons, right? Provide a basic understanding of an unknown area of law. So if I pass the bar and 3 months later I'm sworn in and I hang out my own shingle on Main Street, and the first client before me wants a child custody modification to her child custody agreement. Chances are I've never done that before. So where am I going to start? I'm going to start in a secondary source to give me a basic lay of the land. And then I'm hoping that that secondary source that I use will refer me to the statute. It'll refer me to the child custody statute in my jurisdiction, as well as some of the main Supreme Court and powerful opinions that interpret that statute. And then probably most important for people like me who aren't rocket scientists, secondary sources are often written in such a way in less complex language. Sometimes court opinions are filled with legalese and it's difficult to understand. Maybe a secondary source can break down a legal topic in a way that's easier to digest. It'll explain the statute a little easier, or it might break down that opinion in bits and pieces that are more readily understood. So far we've covered these things. Treatise, that's just a fancy name for a book. So a law practitioner book. State practice aid is a book. I've showed you an example of searching the library catalog can lead you not only to books, but it can lead you to law review articles and other scholarly publications that we have access to electronically. I've mentioned Hein Online is probably your primary database that would have law review and scholarly legal materials. So you'll probably become familiar with the Hein Online database. I've shown you how a Google search can lead you to primary and secondary material that might be on topic. I've shown you the full text finder. And then we briefly covered legal encyclopedias. These last two secondary sources are getting into the weeds a bit, but I believe your text mentioned them. The Gilbert's text might have mentioned it. Restatements of the law. Anybody have any idea what restatement of the law is? Let's see. Carrie, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, it's just a bunch of experts get together and basically state generally what the law should be. And it's not specific to a state, it's just the general overview of it based on the common law.
Based on the common law, exactly. So is it primary or secondary?
Secondary, sir.
Yeah, I think that's what my next slide says. A bunch of smart people get together and try to codify the common law. So lawyers and judges get together every 6 months or a year, and they discuss the trends in the law in that particular setting. So as it pertains to property, torts, what have you, and they try to lay out broad concepts of that area of law so that there's promoting uniformity across the different jurisdictions. Of course, if a court in your jurisdiction relies upon a restatement of the law citation, it becomes very persuasive. And since the court adopted it, the court opinion is primary, so it's quasi-primary, at least the opinion is. So not all secondary sources are treated equal. You're not going to cite to the American jurisprudence, but you might cite to the restatement of laws. And then finally, question 12, what are uniform laws? Similar to the restatement of the laws, right? Carrie?
Those are the ones that a national standard has been set and the state can adopt it. So the state has the legislation has the ability to pull it in and make it their law as well. So those are often primary.
So it's like, exactly. So it's restatement of the laws, but for statutes. They propose So again, a bunch of smart people get together and they propose they propose laws, they propose statutes that they call the 50 states should adopt so that there's uniformity across the country. So examples are the Uniform Commercial Code, penal codes. I think there's a family law one too. There's a uniform law on child custody as well. So if your state has adopted that uniform law and passed it into law, it's no longer a uniform law, it becomes part of the statutes. So at that point, it's no longer a secondary source, it's a primary source and it's part of the statutes of your state. So thankfully for you guys, we're almost done here. Pro tip number one. Keep in the back of your mind that there are these things called the 50 state surveys. They're available on Lexis and Westlaw. So if you're looking to see if there's a statute on point, this 50 state survey is sort of like an ALR annotation. Let me go to Lexis. Okay. Law school. Let me log into Westlaw. It's good to show you how I get around Westlaw a bit. So I log in, get into Westlaw Edge. I don't know why they call it Edge, because if they're on the edge of something special, I don't know. So from my homepage, under content type, secondary sources, so from your secondary source screen on Westlaw, and Lexis is going to be similar. American Law Reports is one of the ones on the main page. And then another one is this thing called 50 state surveys. So this would also be a good answer to that question about the dude or dudette who's writing the law review article on all of the 50 states in child custody. So 50 state surveys, if you're looking for regulations, you'd click regs, or for statutes, you'd go statutes. And then you could either navigate by topic here on the left column. Where did my So for COVID-19, dealing with landlord-tenant evictions, so this is just one example of a 50 state survey that Westlaw has created. So as pertaining to the COVID-19 situation and easing on landlord-tenant evictions, they give you every state that has one. And then in this case, it looks like it's mainly regulatory. So here's your administrative code. If there were a statute, they would also list you as well. So that's just one example. Go back. 50 state surveys again. Select the statutory surveys. From that point, I don't know if it's as specific as child custody. It's worth a shot. No 50 state survey on child custody, but it's pulling child in custody. So mandatory child abuse reporting. So here's another example, a 50 state survey of all of the of all of the state statutes on the instances where and who has an obligation under the state laws to report child abuse. So 50 state surveys, a handy tool in your toolbox. Let's see. Pro tip 2, I've already talked about this. To see if something's online, use your full text finder, use the catalog. So that's it for my PowerPoint show on Westlaw. Just some quick little how do you do's on basic searching concepts. I might start in secondary sources, or I might narrow it down to my state first. So I go over to state materials. I select Pennsylvania because that's what I'm researching. Or if your fact pattern's in another state, you would select that state. Pennsylvania. If I know I wanted to search secondary source, I could go right into West Pennsylvania practice like I've discussed. Child custody. So that's searching for child or custody anywhere in a document. So shared custody orders. I mean, this is probably handy in my research. Presumption concerning custody. Presumptions is between parents trumping and then third parties and on down the line. So I'm getting a basic overview of child custody. Here on the left column is my table of contents, so I can see how this area of the secondary source is laid out. It's leading me to the primary source, the statute. So here's my Purdon's Pennsylvania statute. Here's the section dealing with the presumption of physical custody. When I'm in my statutes, I'm going to also remember that I've got this table of contents button here up on the top left of my screen. So I can see scope of chapter, definitions is important. What's meant by abuse, agency, child, etc. Let's see. Standing for award of physical custody. And I can drill down here and see in what instance that a grandparent would have standing to contest custody. So I've taken my secondary source in Westlaw. I've clicked on a statutory site to get to the Pennsylvania statute. And then I've gone to my table of contents to see if I can find something that's even a little more specific. So that's sort of the process that I use when I'm initially conducting research on something I don't know. I'm going to start in a secondary source, hope that I find a statute or a case on point, and then take it from there. So if there are no questions from y'all, I am done for the evening and I will see you next Thursday. Okay, thank you guys for your attention.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Professor.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You guys too. Thank you.